Okay, so I wanted to talk about compromises, this sort of like zero compromise mentality, I guess you could say. And just to start it off, I mean, obviously there's some compromises that are not bad, when you think about it, if say your boyfriend or your girlfriend really likes to eat somewhere and you don't really like that place, but you want them to be happy and like they were excited about it. Maybe that little compromise, let's go there. Yeah. I'm not talking about that kind of shit. It's mainly the type of ones that you're not supposed to be doing, like those little compromises that lead to another one, and then end up derailing all of your progress. So I was listening to a Real AF podcast and he was talking about it. And it got me thinking about all of the times in my life where little compromises just sort of derailed all of my progress in one area, or it just sort of led me in a direction that maybe I shouldn't have gone. So I wanted to give some examples of times when I've had that happen, and then maybe we could talk about why it's important to talk about this. So the first one that really comes to mind in college was like 1999 or 2000, something around there. I was overweight. I wasn't like really overweight. I never really got like super overweight, but at this time I was probably, 30, 40 pounds overweight, something like that. And so and it was getting worse. Like my eating habits in college were really, really bad because I was totally broke. And like, I remember times when a buddy and I were literally like scrounging up change through all the little crevices in my car just to get like some shit off the dollar menu. And it was like not a lot of options, and I was living on couches, so I didn't really have options to cook anyway, whatever. So my health was getting worse is the whole point of that. So I was actually getting bigger, and I saw a reflection of myself and I was like, oh man, like, fuck, I look like shit, man. This is not good. And I was getting pretty insecure about it. So over the course of a summer vacation, I just, really got really heavily into working out and eating what I considered to be healthy. I mean, it was healthier than what I was eating at the time. It's not as healthy as what I eat now, but it was a good big change at the time. So over the course of the summer, which I don't know, a couple months, 3 months, I don't know how long, I don't remember how long it is, but I went from being overweight to being in really good shape. I mean, that's one of the perks of being in your 20s, like you can lose weight pretty fast. So I got in really good shape. I got in the best shape I'd ever been in. And so when I got back to school, obviously I felt good. All my clothes were fitting nice, whatever. So I was in really good shape. But when I got back to school, the workload started, the schedule started getting a little tough and all that stuff. So the little compromises started creeping in, like I feel like I stayed, and this was a long time ago, so I don't remember exactly, but I feel like I stayed on track for a little while and, little things started to creep in. I was starting to just maybe eat a little more fast food here and there. I wasn't really working out that much anymore. And then eventually all those little compromises just sort of led to just the whole fuck it, everything. Like my diet went back to eating really shitty. I wasn't working out at all, like zero working out. And then that stayed over some years, and I ended up getting in the worst shape that I've ever been. I think I ended up being something like, 65 pounds overweight was pretty much like the heaviest I ever got. Those bad habits stayed with me for quite a long time. I started, very slowly kind of getting back into being in shape and all that stuff. But it really took quite a long time to really figure all that out. Like I'm now in better shape than I was when I got in the best shape of my life, even though I'm 20 some years older. So the new habits came back in. It just took a really long time. But the whole point is it was just these little compromises that sort of led to another one. There's a couple more in that same time frame. Slightly before I went to college, I was a straight edge dude. So like for a number of years, I was playing in hardcore bands and I was living that straight edge lifestyle. I don't remember how many years it was, but it was quite a few years that I was completely straight edge. And so I eventually was just kind of over it. And I decided just to have a drink every now and then and start, I was hanging around with like all these graph writers that were partying all the time. And it was like drinking 40s on the weekends and shit. And eventually that stuff started looking kind of appealing. So, I compromised. I don't think that's a bad thing to do, but at the same time, just want to give an example of where that decision led. So I started drinking again. And then when I was in high school, I used to smoke cigarettes and drink, and I was kind of like this like kind of outcast meddler kid, So when I started drinking again, I started kind of craving having a cigarette, with my beer, So then I started smoking again, and then I started smoking weed, and then I started doing some other drugs, and like just sort of built up. And as I'm kind of like doing all of these things, I'm getting less and less, what's the word? Like, I feel like I used to be fearful of hard drugs. Like, my dad did a pretty good job at sort of describing what some of the bad feelings, because he fucked around when he was younger. He did a lot of things. And so when I was a kid, I feel like he did a really good job explaining the parts that suck. Like, I think he described an overdose to me, and he kind of described these different feelings. And so he didn't do it in a way like, this sort of like shit that you see on TV. I don't know. At least back then, like there was a lot of these weird commercials that made it seem like way different than what it really was. I feel like he was good. He did a good job at sort of explaining the reality of it. So I had a pretty healthy fear of hard drugs, but as I was compromising a little more, that fear started to go away. And then when I did some hard drugs and nothing bad happened, then, there was less and less fear. And then eventually, I was doing more and more of that stuff and being more open to trying all these different kinds of things. And so, my drug use was probably laughable compared to some other people. It wasn't by any means like, I never had to go to rehab, and like I never sold my shit to buy drugs or any of that kind of stuff that other people have dealt with. So I'm fortunate in that regard, but at the same time, little compromises just sort of led to more and more and more. And so I ended up in a place that I just really didn't want to be. And so in that same time frame, another compromise that sort of led me to taking my first break from graffiti, which was when I started college in 98, I was really heavily into graffiti from 91 to 98. And it was like wake up every day, and that's what I thought about was graffiti. But then when I got to college and the work started getting heavier and heavier, I started kind of drifting off of that. And I don't even know if that's a really good example of a compromise, but I just sort of allowed it to kind of just get pushed to the side, even though it was something that was really important to me. And so I stopped drawing and all of these kind of things. Like, I could have easily kept up in some way or another. I could have kept in touch with people and all this sort of stuff. But what ended up happening is I just sort of dropped off the whole scene for like 6 years. And I feel like it was not something that I needed to do. It wasn't necessary. I was just sort of caught up in this other stuff. I don't know. That's may not be a very good example, but I really wanted to tie this in and at least talk about graph in some way or another. So if you think about that in a sense, if you're, one session, you could say, I'm not going to paint today. I'll paint next time. And then those kind of things can build up. And that happens to me all the time. Like, I'll have the itch, it's like where you go and you paint something and you have a really good time. It comes out the way you want it. And then you just want to go again and again and again. And you kind of get this sort of momentum going. And then you'll compromise. I'm talking about myself. Then I'll compromise and say, I just don't really feel like it. It's hot or it's whatever, and those things always lead to these longer time off. Like, I haven't taken a 6-year break since that time. So I don't even know if I mentioned that, but I took 6 years off of the scene. And so, that compromise sort of led to that. So that was all kind of a while back. So I'll talk about some of the current ones. Like when I was kind of dabbling in drugs and I was drinking and I was unhealthy and overweight and all that kind of stuff, eventually I stopped doing drugs pretty much like cold turkey. I was in a situation that it was sort of like, was one of those situations where you're around people that you're always doing that stuff with. And then I ended up just like separating myself from that. And right when I did that, the desire to do that was completely gone. So I was really lucky in that regard. But I still drank every now and then, or not even every now and then, probably like every week or something like that. And then that ended up tapering off. And then I ended up just not really doing anything for a number of years, except for weed. I was smoking weed during that time, but that was all I was doing. And then eventually I stopped doing that. And then so there was a number of years where I was just completely not doing anything. And then not that long ago, maybe 2 years ago, I was like, I kind of feel like having a drink again. And that started that whole sort of cycle over again. I'm not doing hard drugs. Like, I'm never fucking doing that again, especially now. Even if I wanted to, I wouldn't do it because of the whole fentanyl thing. Like, I would just suggest staying the fuck away from all hard drugs. It's not worth it. There's people dying all over the place because of that fentanyl shit. So that stuff's showing up in all kinds of things. So that's not really the point, but I kind of started dabbling and drinking again. And that sort of cycle started up again where I was drinking more and more. And then eventually, it didn't take very long that I was like, you know what? I don't even really enjoy this. Like, I'll still probably have a drink every now and then, but I think I don't even remember the last time I drank. It's been at least 6 months or something. So, but that sort of behavior, that little compromise started coming in. I talk about this kind of stuff all the time, but like the sort of diet and health compromises, that one's a real easy one to, like, I am hyper aware that as soon as if I'm like right now, I'm on my pretty strict program, working out every day. I'm still doing the 75 hard. I'm on the Live Hard phase 2. So there's no compromise. It's built in. You can't compromise or you fail. So, but I know when I'm off the program or in between phases, there's going to be some sort of pull to like have some of those foods that I try to avoid. But I know for a fact that as soon as I say, okay, yeah, man, I'll have some of this or I'll have some of that, I know that's going to lead into more. Like it always does. So I'm trying to make a decision right now because I think I have like 3 or 4 days left on phase 2. And then there's a really long break between phase 2 and phase 3. I don't know, it's like 100 and something days. I don't remember how long, but I know it's a really long one. And so if I compromise on the diet portion of things, I'm really aware that it's probably going to lead to more. But the stupid thing is I'm going to do it anyway. It's totally ridiculous, but I'm going into it with a little more, hopefully a little more discipline than what I was last time. Cause that shit got pretty out of control between phase 1 and phase 2, where I ended up getting sick. I talked about it on an episode. I don't remember, a couple episodes back. One thing I'm not going to compromise on is working out every day. I think I talked about that in another one. I'm trying to do 365 days of not missing a day of exercise. And so, but when I was thinking about that, even though I have been doing that, and I don't know how many days I'm on now, but I think I'm close to the half-year mark or somewhere around there. But even that, I was starting to compromise when I was not on the Live Hard. Live Hard is the 75 hard plus the phases. So when I wasn't on the Live Hard or I was in between phases, I didn't have to do 2 45-minute workouts. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to do 1 45-minute workout a day, give myself a little more time and all this kind of shit. And then that workout ended up starting to go, maybe I'll just work out 30 minutes. Or maybe I'll just do this, maybe I'll just do that. And then it started getting down to the point where I was like, if I go any lower than this, I don't even think it's going to count as a workout, because it's not even enough to really maintain what I've built so far. So those compromises, it's just crazy how it always leads to more. And I don't know, maybe there's something in our brains that this is normal, because I feel like it's not an abnormal thing. So why am I talking about this? Mainly why I wanted to talk about this is because I don't know if I've always been aware of this. Like back when I was falling off track, or I was kind of going down paths that I probably shouldn't have gone, I don't know if I had that awareness of, hey, if you do this, this is going to probably lead to this, and it's going to probably lead to this, and then it's going to keep getting out of control. And next thing you know, you're going to be fat again, or next thing you know, you're going to be drinking way more than you should, or you might be doing drugs. Like, I don't know if I had that awareness. So that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it. The awareness to me now is one of the most helpful things, because as I'm seeing in the future, I'm going to have this long break between my phases. I'm already thinking about those compromises and what they're going to lead to, so I feel like that awareness at least is preparing me to maybe not let it get too out of control. And so the other thing outside of awareness, I think, is also developing the discipline to be able to fight it, either to not allow yourself to make those compromises, or if you do make those compromises, be able to recognize when they are starting to lead to worse things, you have enough discipline to be able to get back on. And so what I have found, is the more time you put in, obviously the easier it is to stay on track, or to get back on track. I did a whole episode talking about that, but I think it's one of those things that's really important, because if I look back in my life, I've gone from being healthy to unhealthy to healthy to unhealthy. Sometimes the unhealthy phases would literally last for years, like where I didn't work out at all, like zero, and I ate like shit every day. But now that I've put in so much time, like I've put in years of being healthy, that it's actually pretty hard to even imagine getting back to that point. Even though there has been some times where I spent several weeks without working out, and then I started just feeling really, really bad about myself. Like, it's not so much a vanity thing, but it's more about, I know that's something that I need to be doing. Especially, I'm 48 years old. Like, there's no more time to fuck around. Like, it's not like I'm going to die soon. Well, I don't know. I could die fucking right now for all I know. But if all goes well, I got a good amount of life ahead of me. But at the same time, I'm still, at the halfway mark, or past the halfway mark, depending on how shit goes. So the way I'm seeing it is, I got no more time to fuck around. Like, these habits need to stay until the rest of my life is over. So, I think back when I was younger, especially when I made all that progress back in college, because that's the first time I ever did that, where I went from being unhealthy to being in really good shape in a short amount of time. So I kind of had that in the back of my head, where like, oh yeah, fuck it, man. I'll just drink a bunch of beers and eat all this shitty food and get fat, and then I'll just get back in shape again. The older you get, the harder it is to do that again. Like, it's one thing to do that when you're in your 20s. If I fall completely off track right now, it's going to be a fucking nightmare to get back on. If I'm like 50 years old and fat, and I don't want to discourage anybody that is out of shape at 50, because you got to do it anyway. I mean, even if you're 70 and you're out of shape, just it's time to get your shit back together. But this sort of mentality that I have right now is it's like, you know what? I'm not even looking at the fact that I could do that, and I have done that. I've done that multiple times, where I've gone from being fat to fit. I'm just not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to allow the compromises to push me back to somewhere where I don't want to be. And so, for me, I use 75 hard. I know I talk about it all the time. I hope it's not annoying, but it's just it's such a good program. And now that this is the first time I've ever really committed to doing the whole Live Hard program. So after the 75 days, there's 3 phases, and it takes a whole year to do all of it. And then there's gaps in between the phases. And so before, I was just kind of doing 75 hard. Whenever things would just get super off track, I'd be like, all right, I got to get back on 75 hard. And then I felt like it was easier when you have these check marks of tasks that you have to check off, or you're going to fail. So especially when you get something like 60 days in, you really don't want to miss any of those tasks and have to start all over again. So I find that that it's easier when I'm on that. So doing the Live Hard thing, you have a whole year, and obviously you have time where you're not on the program. Those are times where you have to maintain your discipline, but I know that every year I'm going to do the whole thing. So I got a couple days left on phase 2, and then I got a big long gap where I have to stay. I got to maintain my shit on my own throughout that gap. I don't know. I think it was like 160 days. It's a long time that I'm going to have to do it. So, but the sort of kicker is like, if you fail any of the phase 1 or phase 2, you just start over at phase 2. You start that phase over again. So like I fucked up on phase 1 and I had to start that over again. You don't have to do the whole program over again. But when you do phase 3, if you fuck up anything on phase 3, you got to do the whole shit over again. You can't just finish phase 3. So I don't know. I kind of started getting back onto that talk, but it's a good program. I think it's definitely worth looking at. So that has been a very big help in helping me be aware of these compromises. And I'm kind of losing my train of thought. So I'm just going to wrap it up. Hopefully that all makes sense, and hopefully it's helpful. Awareness is critical, and building up that discipline. So if you're off track, get back on track and do your best to fight off those little compromises. Hope you're all doing well. Once again, we have a dope little community going. If you're interested in joining that, we're looking for like-minded people. Go to graffitimachine.com, and there's a link on there. It says like join our community or something like that. Click that. There's some info there. Fill out your information, and we'll schedule a time to talk. All right. Have a good one. All right. Good.
Appreciate each and every one of you guys who are supporting the cause and continue to spread the love. And, yeah, stay up.